Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Narizma and now I'm from English Literature A 2018 and here I will talk about late Victorian era. The first here we will talk about the characteristic of this era, the characteristic of the work at this era, the order and the works, and the review and reflection. So Also, Queen Victoria, the embodiment of not only uprightness, waited until January 1901, and until the last year of her recent year of patriotic observe, to mark of apology of national and imperial guilty, Victorian values, belief, and standard of personal and social behavior were already being challenged, sometimes angrily that a new generation in intellectual and writers, the literature of the last 20 years of the century encouraged in extended and various discourse which attempt to evaluate the assumption of the 1850s and 1816s and the work out the implication of the of new concept of liberation and evolutionary development. So the contrast between generation and attitude is yet more pointed in George Bernard Shaw play You Never Tell, You Never Can Tell, where the liberal education of an emancipated woman of the 1870s and education based on studying Huxley, Mill, and George Eliot is widely dismissed as not having nothing in it which would prevent her marrying an archbishop. It was not simply a certain opinion has gone out of fashion or had been discredited, but the late Victorian writer tended to condition the idea of human progress with a prominent Darwinian question marks. Society itself was assumed to be developing according to certain laws, but they were laws which teetered old, orderly assumption by introducing notion of learn, change, and adaptation. So next is English fiction in the last two decades of the 19th century has all too frequently been seen as dominated by the work of the subtle, demanding, experienced American Henry James, and by the novelist patronizing dismissed by James as the good little Thomas Hardy. The reality is but more complex and wide-ranging. James increasingly evolutive novel took time to find discriminating and appreciative audience, while hardly far more peculiar, but rural and provincial stories contrast striking with the predominantly urban, and indeed urban fiction of ideas which also marks the period. So the works of Samuel Butler is also central of the cultural debate of the 1880 and 1890. For Butler's best-known works, Outmoon or Over the Range and The Way of All Flesh are published representatively in 1872 and 1919 and 3. This, despite his scholarly of idiosyncratically debates with Darwin and Darwinism, Butler struck in contemporaries as Homo unius libri, a man of a book. A Man of Wonder. The book was a dystopian fantasy era of home. It is perfectly works one which then of divine a term of reference by means of negative while validating is positive to singular drug corners. So its reflection back to high Victorian England remain open to various interpretations. So it trusts religion which a puritanical reference, daring ridiculous of narrators decided to convert to Christianity and narrative to this country. He discovered by exploiting his zeal as help headers and his theology as decided courtly. The Church of Ireland is obsessed as still firmly as real society moves as its buildings are the part of Wissac's landscape, but it is utterly has been withdrawn and its physical structure are seen as now incapable of holding, forming, and interpreting a grand, but essentially discomforting idea of the universe. So the immersive process of evaluation of advance literally regardless of human being and human blessing. Not nature really foster individual engagement and seen in a proper perspective. It mirrors again any comforting belief in providence and it a sympathetic response between human beings and their environment. Much gazing, most interesting and successful verse and consider the emancipation of women with the complexity and difficulties of the Bohemian literary life. So late 19th century English literature remained remarkable, insular in its style and perceptions. It is predominant concern were in English society and its ills, the English religion and its development, and with English position within the United Kingdom, and as the center of still expanding colonial and commercial empire. There, there often seems to be a full enough justification of an insularity. So not all the reason behind the justification were birth and success. He rightly considered the with imperial explanation and much of the domestic discourse of social and political problems. So this is all of my videos. I'm sorry for any mistakes. So thank you very much.